Cattle Show.
What's happening? It is here. The moment we've been waiting for, draft week. We are 3 sleeps away? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 3 sleeps away, which probably means 2 sleeps away because I'm not going to be able to sleep on Wednesday night. Thanks for joining me as always on this Monday. It is much appreciated. We start with the latest on Jayden Daniels. 10 to 14 days ago, we got this report from Evan Silva that Jayden Daniels did not like, or the Commanders did not like the meeting with Daniels. There was something going on between those two sides. It was not necessarily simpatico. We got that about 2 weeks ago. Now, I took that report with a grain of salt because that was coming off of the combine. It's an 18-minute interview. Let's wait what happens with the visit of Daniels to Washington. Then we heard from Adam Schefter over the weekend saying that the agent wasn't happy. Daniels' agent was not happy with how Washington decided to bring in everybody for the visit all at once. Did not think that there was enough time devoted to Daniels during the process. There were some tweets. There were some liked tweets, all of those things. So we also heard that Daniels, after the combine, was not necessarily in love with the idea of playing in the Northeast. Remember, Phil Perry came out and said that the inner circle of Jayden Daniels had let it be known that they would likely not enjoy the Northeast, that they would rather have Jayden Daniels stay away from the Northeast. Now, Daniels responded to that by, quote, tweeting the cap. So Daniels shot that down. But as I said at the time, did Daniels shoot that down because that's how he truly felt? He did not care about playing in the Northeast. He was fine with playing here. Or did he tweet out the cap to quiet the noise? Because the last thing you want to do during this draft process is cause some kind of fury from a team or cause chaos on your end. Look like the troublemaker. Look like the person who was trying to hold certain things back. So we don't know. And we don't know the truth. I don't know it. You don't know it. I'm not even sure the teams know it. So what is going on with Daniels? What is up? There's the questioning about Washington liking him. There's the question about him liking Washington. The agent wasn't happy with Washington. The inner circle, not in love with the idea of Daniels playing in the Northeast. What is happening? I have 2 options. 2 likely options. Either, number 1, an interested team is trying to play games. A team that wants Daniels, a team that is desperate for Daniels, knows that Daniels is not going to be there when they pick in the first round. So out of desperation, they're leaking all of these different things about the Patriots and about, what's going on with Washington. And, hey, maybe Daniels doesn't want to play there. Hey, Daniels wasn't happy with the Commanders and how they handled their visits. So that's one option. One option is that there's an interested team in Daniels, and they're trying to force or cause Washington and or New England to trade the pick or pass on Daniels. The second option is that Daniels wants to go to Vegas. And I think this is something we absolutely have to look at. There is the possibility. I'm not saying the likelihood. I'm not saying probability. There is a possibility that Daniels or Daniels' quote-unquote team wants Daniels in Vegas. Vegas, of course, as we know, on the West Coast, right? We know Daniels' background. He was born, grew up in California, started his career at Arizona State, played in the very, very warm Baton Rouge for LSU. So maybe Daniels does want to stay closer to the West Coast. And the Raiders have Antonio Pierce as their head coach. Pierce played a big role in trying to recruit Daniels out of high school. So he has that natural connection with Antonio Pierce. So I think it's absolutely something that needs to be looked at. Daniels in his camp, along with the Raiders, maybe both are complicit in this. They're trying to get Daniels to Vegas. And so what are they doing? They're throwing a bunch of shade towards Washington. They leaked out that rumor about Daniels maybe not wanting to play in the Northeast. So maybe that makes Washington and New England, when the Raiders give them a call, maybe that will get the Raiders closer to the guy that they want. And that would be Daniels. We obviously know that the Raiders need a quarterback. So I think there are two options here with all of this talk regarding Daniels. It's either other teams playing games and trying to mess with the top of the draft board, or it's Daniels and his camp trying to get him to Vegas to play for the coach that he wants to play for, Antonio Pierce. It's one of those two things. I have more thoughts. Before we get to them, don't forget to give us that like and subscribe. More thumbs up means more eyeballs. Continue to build this community. The only way we can do that is by defeating the YouTube algorithm. And you do that by liking the podcast, liking this channel, and subscribing to this channel. The goal of 3,500 subscribers is right there in front of us. It's a big goal. The only way we get there is by liking and subscribing. I also want to let you know that tomorrow we will have a special guest. This is draft week. So what are we going to do? Of course, we're going to have a local draft analyst on the program. Tomorrow, Alex Barth, 98.5 The Sports Hub, Catch 22, a million other places. Alex Barth will join us tomorrow at 11 a.m. to take a look at some of these prospects, dig in deep. That should be fun. So Alex Barth on the program tomorrow. Like, subscribe, rate, and review Spotify and Apple Pods. And if you're interested, we're doing a bunch of exclusive draft content at the Patreon page this week. We also reviewed both game ones over the weekend from the Season Bs at the Patreon. Check it out, patreon.com/Nick Cattles, Cattles, $5 a month. Today's podcast on that Patreon has to do with Drake May and some interesting metrics. So that's happening at the Patreon. Back to Jayden Daniels. Remember all of the talk about Caleb Williams and how Caleb Williams' dad was getting in the middle of the process and how Williams' dad was very involved. He was talking to agents about the idea of Williams possibly owning a slice of a football team. Remember all of that talk? It's funny, that talk ended when we all realized that Chicago was going to draft Williams number 1, right? Funny how that works. As soon as Chicago seemingly made up their mind at number 1, all of that talk about Williams being an off-field issue because of his dad, all of that talk stopped. Just ended. I haven't heard a word muttered about that over the past month and a half, 2 months. Funny how that works. But did you know that Caleb Williams is not the only prospect in this draft that has a parent involved? And some would say heavily involved. That other prospect is Jayden Daniels. Daniels' mom has been involved with the process. She's been involved with the process since he was coming out of high school. Tom Pelissero, his latest at NFL.com over the weekend. Here's what he wrote. Regina Jackson, who is the mother of Jayden Daniels, was reportedly implicated for buying and booking flights for recruits and accompanying adults in the NCAA investigation into Arizona State's recruiting violation. So Daniels' mother was booking flights for recruits and their parents or the people that were accompanying them. Interesting, right? Daniels himself was not implicated. Jackson denied the involvement, but Daniels' mother, Pelissero writes, had a blueprint for her son that she wanted him to follow as an 18-year-old quarterback and was known to be heavily involved with all aspects of the program during Jayden's time there. Soak that in. So Jayden Daniels' mother was so heavily involved that she was helping book flights of recruits out to Arizona State. Think about that. She was that involved. And she had a quote-unquote blueprint for how to handle her 18-year-old son who was a quarterback. Now, look, I haven't read anything that Daniel's mother has been intricately involved in this process, but would anybody doubt that? If your mother is so involved, and I'm not saying she shouldn't be. I mean, she shouldn't be booking flights for recruits. But yeah, she could be involved. It's her son, right? She wants the best for her son. I get it. However, if you look at that and you think of how involved she reportedly was with his time at Arizona State, is it a reach at all to believe that she is heavily involved in this situation? Of course it's not. Was Jayden Daniels' mother the inner circle who was telling people that Daniels might not want to be in the Northeast? Maybe mama wants her son back home. Maybe mama wants him back to the West Coast. Mama missed him when he was in Baton Rouge. Mama doesn't want her son in the Northeast playing professional football. She wants her son close to her. I don't think it's a reach at all when you look at her history and how involved she's been. It's not a reach. It's not going beyond means of reasonable to believe that his mother, as much as she was involved with the Arizona State process at the beginning of his college career, is as involved at the beginning of his pro career. So this could be Daniel's mother getting involved in the process, Daniel's inner circle getting involved because of mama, and Mama Jackson wants her son back home. She don't want him in Foxborough. She don't want him in Washington, D.C. She wants him home, or at least close to home. California, a lot closer to Vegas than Massachusetts and Washington, D.C. the last time I checked. And I'm a pretty good indicator of that because I lived in Sacramento for a year and a half. I can confirm to all of you right now that California is hella far from here. So maybe this is Jayden's mother, Jayden's inner circle, playing games along with the Raiders to try to get Daniels out to Vegas. That's what I would put my money on. And, you know, no pun intended with the awful Vegas thing there. But that's what I'm looking at. That's what I'm looking at. I would not be surprised whatsoever if some games are being played to get him back to the West Coast. Now, does it work? We don't know. The reality of the situation is Washington will pick the guy if they want the guy. The reality is New England will pick the guy if they want the guy. If they love the quarterback and they think that quarterback can be the future of their franchise, they're going to spend the pick on him. But we'll see if these games are working at all. Ken jumps in with a super chat. My man Ken just continues to support the program big time. Can't say enough. A $20 super chat. Thank you, Ken. I'll take a Ditka deal for the Raiders to move up to 2. Multiple picks this year and at least 2 future firsts, probably 3. Same if Daniels makes it to 3. The question, and Ken, I've been saying this for the last few weeks, right? I wrote a column about this at BSJ. I did a podcast on this with more details. The second best option to me for the Patriots is the full Monty. If they can thread the needle and somehow move down, move back up, and still get a quarterback that they really like / love to go along with other draft assets, that aside from sticking and picking at 3, the one that you love, to me, is the second best option that could be on the table. And so I would have to know that the Patriots would be able to do that. I don't want them moving back to 13. I'm not comfortable with them moving back to 11. If you move back to 11, though, at least you have a chance. It might be an outside chance, but you have a chance at still getting one of the top tackles in this class or one of the top wide receivers in this class. You move back to 13, even though it's only 2 slots. Moving from 3 to 13 is a lot. And I think you absolutely would miss out on Joe Alt. I would imagine you miss out on Harrison, Odunze, and Neighbors. You might miss out on the second best tackle on your board, and who knows what that is or who that is. Is it Fashanu? Is it, Fa'utanu? Who's that number 2 guy on the Pats board at left tackle? So if you move all the way down to 13, that to me is too much of a downward spiral there in the draft to go from a top 3 pick to the 13th pick. But if the Patriots have a second move behind that to get them back into the top, say 8, If they could move that 13 pick to Atlanta, get the 8th pick, Atlanta moves down to 13 because they're looking defense, and they believe they can still get one of the top 2 or 3 defensive players on the board at 13, then we can have that conversation. But I don't want just a move from 3 to 13. I think that's too much of a precipitous drop. And you have to wonder how much Vegas would have to give up. The 3 first-round picks, I don't look at that move from 3 to 13 as a first-round pick. That's a pick swap. So 3 future firsts to me, I don't know if the Patriots can get that. And I don't know if it's legal. I know Burt Breer said something along the lines of you can't trade a future first-round pick if it's in 2027, I think he said. So can you get a 25 and a 26 plus some other things? Maybe. But it would have to be a ridiculous offer to go from 3 to 13 for me. Again, I appreciate it, Ken. Your support of the program, unbelievable. My guy Ken is a Patreon member. Bunch of exclusive draft content hitting the Patreon page this week. Patreon.com/Nick Cattle, CATTLES, $5 a month. Back to Daniels, I still think it's likely that he ends up in either Washington or here. Schefter this morning after over the weekend saying, the agent didn't love the process. Schefter wrote this morning at ESPN.com that Daniels is ready to accept wherever he is selected and attempt to become the face of that franchise. A little bit of damage control, I would say. While Daniels would have liked more FaceTime with Commanders officials during his visit last week, the signs continue to point to Washington taking him at number 2. Washington still is going through its process, but Daniels is the favorite to be its pick. So Schefter standing by, Washington is the favorite. He is leaving himself some wiggle room now by saying they're still going through the process. Mike Reese over the weekend, he wrote the latest on the number 3 pick. The most likely scenario per sources, and we know Mike. Mike is as credible as they come, right? Mike Reese doesn't throw ish against the wall. Reese wrote the most likely scenario per his sources remains that the Patriots will stay put at number 3 and select Daniels, May, or J.J. McCarthy. So the stick and pick leads the clubhouse. Simply put, as one Patriot source said last week, quote, you can't win without a quarterback, unquote. Mayo and some top decision makers have privately acknowledged that their legacies will be tied to whatever they decide at quarterback. And then Reese follows it up with this, barring an unexpected blockbuster trade offer, the Patriots will move forward with the plan that has been months in the works, getting a quarterback. Don't forget to give us that thumbs up, like the program, like the content, subscribe. Both of those things mean the world to us. If you're listening on demand, Spotify, Apple Pods, we are growing over at Spotify and Apple Pods, and it's because of all of you rating and reviewing. So Tom Curran, Mike Reese, Burt Breer have all reported in the last week or so that the Patriots are looking at either a huge blockbuster trade, a huge offer. Curran called it a huge booty. Reese is calling it a blockbuster. Others have said a major haul. The Patriots are looking at this, and they are saying, we either take a major, ridiculous haul for this number 3 pick, or we're sticking and picking and drafting a quarterback. Because there's no doubt that the Patriots are still pursuing the bag. Mayo went on record and said it. Last week, Wolf said that they had not been offered the bag yet. And you have all of these local reporters who are very tied in. Again, Mike Reese is as tied in as they are. Tom Curran has been very, very tied in, especially over the past couple of months. You've got those two guys and Burt Breer saying they're still taking phone calls, but they're going to have to get knocked over by an offer. So the Patriots' pursuit of the bag continues. Now, the $1 million question is, what is a blockbuster offer? And the second question to that, a follow-up, is Wolf and company throwing this out there to try to get a team to go crazy when in the end there might be an offer on the table that they're actually thinking of taking? That's possible as well. Minnesota might already have 11, 23, and a 2025 first-round pick and another pick on the table. The Patriots, if they were being honest, maybe they would take that deal. maybe they would take that deal. But instead of saying, oh, we got the deal, they're going to continue to tell people and to leak to people that they want the bag. Because maybe they want to try to get Christian Darrisaw from Minnesota. Maybe they want to try to get Justin Jefferson from Minnesota. It doesn't hurt, right? They don't have to make a decision until Thursday night. That's why I've said from the beginning here, the best thing the Patriots can do, unless somebody calls them with a Godfather offer that is borderline embarrassing, unless they do that, the best thing the Patriots can do is wait. Wait until you're on the clock, because the offer you have right now on the table can absolutely change by that point. And maybe Minnesota, feeling the desperation and feeling the pressure and feeling the urgency and saying to themselves, damn, if we don't move up to New England at 3 and we feel like we're really close, if we don't get to 3, then we're not going to get our guy. So this could be the point of the Patriots might actually like what they've been offered, but they're trying to push other teams to offer even more, because there's nothing wrong with wanting more. Or they just haven't gotten the bag yet. More thoughts on Daniels coming up in a minute. Alan jumps in with a $10 super chat. Thank you, Alan. Do you think that DM would be more suitable as cold weather quarterback than Daniels? Of course, talking about Drake May versus Daniels. And is the cold weather factor really that significant, or is it irrelevant to an NFL professional? Well, couple things here. I do think that Drake May would be better suited for the weather, and it's not the cold as much as it is the wind. May has a stronger arm than Daniels. So if you look at Drake May in the arm, then you would say if he's got to play in the elements, he would be much better in the elements, or much more comfortable throwing the football through that wind. Daniels has a good arm. He doesn't have a great arm. So he might have a little bit more of an issue. When we talk about weather, I always look at wind more than rain and snow. I just always think about the wind. You can get through the snow and the rain. They've got gloves now. Daniels has, I think, 9 3/8 hands. So he's got big enough hands. Interestingly enough, May, I think, is 9 1/8. So May has smaller hands than Daniels, which is interesting. But I think of the wind. So that's number one. Number two, though, the cold plays a role when the player wants it to play a role. And what I mean by that is mentally. Some guys just don't love the cold. I'll tell you. Maybe I've been softened up by my time living in Virginia and living in California. I lived the first 30 plus years of my life in Rhode Island and Massachusetts. So maybe got a little soft during those two moves, because now I'm back here in Foxborough, and I'll tell you, when it gets under 40 degrees, I ain't a big fan. Now, I'll go to Patriots games, certainly, and I will warm up like many of us do when we go to games by layering and, of course, having some beverages before the game, tailgating. But under 40 degrees, man, I'm not pumped about that. My buddy asked me to go to his house this weekend and watch some of the playoffs, and he was going to be outside with like a heater and everything. And I said, look, man, I am soft when it's, when that first digit in the temperature is below a 5, like I got to get a 6. If I get a 6 on that first number, I'm with you. So if Daniels just hates the freaking cold, then he's going to inevitably be uncomfortable playing in the freaking cold. So, that's more about mental. That's more about the mental toughness, going out there and it's, 5 degrees and you're willing to ball and you don't let that affect your play. It doesn't impact you in what you do. So Jayden Daniels, again, born in California, grew up in California, played at Arizona State, played at LSU. He hasn't played in anything close to that kind of weather. Thank you, Alan, for the support. Thank you for the super chat. The Patriots, by the way, it's the right approach to me. Right now, you should be looking at the top two options, right? Top two options. You love the quarterback. You stick and pick at 3. You get your guy. You get the face of the franchise. If not, look for the bag. Look for the freaking bag. If you don't love the guy that's there, then you take the bag and you possibly move back up and draft a quarterback that you really like but don't think is necessarily worth the third pick, or you think the assets that you got to go along with that quarterback that you eventually draft is better than just taking the quarterback at 3, whatever it is. But really, those should be the two choices right now on the table. You either stick and pick at 3 and you take your quarterback, or you get knocked over by an offer. Could they get both? They could get both. The full Monty. I've said this. The second best option to me is the full Monty. If you don't love that quarterback, you don't want to take that quarterback at 3, move down, move back up. It's difficult to do, but Monty Ossenfort did it last year in the draft with Arizona. Go with the full Monty Ossenfort if you can do it. And I found it very interesting, folks. Very, very interesting that Adam Schefter wrote this at ESPN this morning. Many are waiting to see how the Patriots value May versus McCarthy and whether New England could make a play like the Cardinals. Now, I'm not a soothsayer. I ain't Miss Cleo. I ain't Nostradamus. Okay? And I've been wrong plenty of times, and I will admit when I'm wrong. However, we were on this, weren't we? Talking about the full Monty a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. Wrote a column 2-3 weeks ago. We were on this thing here at the Nick Cattle Show. And now Schefter is writing, people are waiting to see if New England could make a play like the Cardinals. If the Patriots opt to trade out of number 3, Schefter writes, they could follow a similar path as Arizona to get a quarterback they covet. You don't say. You don't say. So the question at that moment, if you could pull the full Monty, the question that the Patriots have to answer, do they love Drake May enough to roll with just May at number 3 or Jayden Daniels? If May goes second, do the Patriots love Jayden Daniels enough to pick him at 3 and be happy with that decision? Or do they look at these quarterbacks? Do they look at May and Daniels and McCarthy as pretty close? And they might see those 3 guys so close that at the end of the day, Elliott Wolf says to himself, you know what? J.J. McCarthy plus everything that we're getting on top of McCarthy, the draft capital, is better than just Drake May or just Jayden Daniels. Now, I think if Wolf is absolutely in love with Daniels and or May, then the answer to that question is no. You pick the guy because you absolutely love him, and there is no replacing a franchise quarterback. If you think that May or Daniels can be a top 8 quarterback in the NFL within the next 2 or 3 years, then you draft that dude at number 3, you do cartwheels, and you're done. But if there's a question, if you think J.J. McCarthy could be close to those guys, if you think May/Daniels could end up being closer to the 10th best quarterback in the NFL, and you think McCarthy has a ceiling to get him to 12 or 13, now you're looking, what's the difference between the 10th quarterback in the league and the 12th quarterback in the league? And then you think of, it's not only the 12th quarterback in the league, but it's the 12th quarterback and the draft capital that we got from this trade. That's the question. That's the $1 million question. It would be McCarthy plus versus May or Daniels. That's the math. So very, very interesting stuff. All right. Before we continue, because there was an interesting thing in Mike Reese's column yesterday that I want to get to. Is there another influential voice in the Patriots brain trust? We'll get to that in a minute. But first, the Nick Cattle Show is brought to you by Warzone Paintball and Airsoft. Warzone has 9 maps on 30-plus acres of land, multiple villages, trench warfare map, hilltop forts. They've got paintball, they've got airsoft, they've got kid versions of paintball and airsoft, something for every age group starting at 6+. Just show up with jeans, good shoes, long sleeve shirt. They take care of the rest. Low-key, casual, 4.9 star rating online. Who has a 4.9 star rating online in 2024? Warzone Paintball and Airsoft do. They are in North Kingston, Rhode Island, so if you want to go play some paintball or airsoft, want to have some fun as the weather warms up, check them out. North Kingston, Rhode Island. Give them a call at 401-228-6366. That's 401-228-6366. Let them know the Nick Cattle Show sent you. All right, so over the weekend, Mike Reese wrote this. One notable behind-the-scenes development over the past few weeks came with longtime captain Matthew Slater accepting a full-time position with the Patriots. Slater had other opportunities he could have pursued, but elected to stay. One source described his role as a right-hand man to first-year head coach Gerard Mayo, providing Mayo a sounding board on football and team building, as well as assistance in people development. This is interesting. So Matthew Slater has a full-time role within the Patriots organization, which I think all of us love the idea. Not a bad idea to have Matthew Slater hanging around. But what's really interesting to me is we never really had a defined role for Slater over the past week or two. We knew he was around, but what was his role? Well, Reese is saying that one source described Slater to him as Mayo's right-hand man. That's significant, folks, because on top of being Mayo's right-hand man, Reese writes that Slater is providing Mayo a sounding board on football and team building, not just people development. That to me is significant. How large of a voice does Matthew Slater have? Reese continued to write, Mayo was a first-round draft pick in 2008. Slater was a fifth-round pick that year. Once Mayo pursued a career in coaching, he had previously told Slater it was one of his dreams for them to work together in hopes of developing something in which they could be proud. Huh. You know, I didn't know, hey, Slater, was he going to be a team chaplain? Was he just going to be a conduit, player, coach, right? But this sounds more involved. And the fact that Reese writes that Gerard Mayo told Slater it was one of his dreams for them to work together. Okay, then. But again, Mike Reese is not telling us that Matthew Slater is just being the good guy, the good cop, or whatever it is between players and coaches. He's not just being there to be, faith-based and a chaplain. He's involved. Again, Reese writes that Slater is providing Mayo a sounding board on football and team building. So until we get more reporting that tells us different, I'm thinking that Slater is more dealing with personalities and character building instead of just, evaluating on-field performance. I'm not going to go that far. But it is interesting because if Gerard Mayo trusts Matthew Slater as much as Mike Reese writes that he trusts him, character plays a role. And if you have somebody on the board, does Gerard Mayo, if that guy has a character or some maturity issues, does Matthew Slater weigh in on that? I don't know the answer, but I think it's a relevant question and it's a legitimate question to ask given what Mike Reese wrote about Slater this weekend. All right, lots of number three talk. I have more draft talk for you because we know this football team has three big needs. Don't forget, give us that like, subscribe to the channel, rate and review. Let's continue to build this network. Let's continue to build this alternative. So we know Patriots have three big needs: quarterback, tackle, wide receiver. I don't care what Elliott Wolf said yesterday. He's not in the business of telling the truth. He's not going to go out there and declare to the world, yeah, we don't want a left tackle, or yes, we absolutely want a left tackle, and yes, we absolutely are desperate for a wide receiver to play X. He's not going to go out there and say it. We know it. We all know it. The Patriots need a young left tackle. They need an X receiver, and they need a quarterback to build this franchise off of. Here's the question, because we've spent so much time on talking about number three. What do you do at number 34? Field Yates, during his conference call a week or two ago, said he thinks the offensive tackle run in the 20s is going to be fairly significant. He said, Wolf talked about the, weaponize the offense. And while I like a lot of these wide receivers, if the Patriots start to see some of the guys they really view as their preferred targets to go off the board, is there a chance that they can be a team that tries to move back into the top of the first, back into the first round? Sorry, not the top of, into the first round. Given the fact their offseason has been relatively quiet on that front and projected the idea of them taking quarterback third overall, it would not surprise me if the Patriots say, quote, we have to be aggressive with either a trade up for a wide receiver or taking multiple receivers in this year's draft, unquote. That was Field Yates. He continued and said, nothing is more important when you have a young quarterback doing everything you can to surround that player to give him a chance to be competitive. Burt Breer on the offensive tackles said he thinks seven offensive tackles will go in the first round, maybe more. And it's because the scarcity of the position. He says he thinks that we could see 3 tackles go in the top 10. How about wide receivers? Breer wrote this. The offensive tackle dynamic also has him thinking, good as this receiver class is, maybe just 5 go in the first round. And he names Harrison, Neighbors, Odunze, Thomas, and Mitchell. With teams knowing there's more help outside of the first round at receiver than at any other position. So, here's my question to all of you. What would you do with the number 34 pick if you stick and pick at 3 and you go quarterback? If you draft either Daniels or May at 3, what do you do at 34? It's a fascinating question. We haven't really dived into this. Now, to me, I'll go through the options, okay? One option is you stick and pick at 34 as well, and you draft either a wide receiver or a tackle at 34. So you get your quarterback at 3, you come back at 34 with your wide receiver or tackle. Another option is that you trade up into the late first round for a tackle or a receiver. You're not necessarily thrilled with the guys that are there at 34. You want somebody better, so you move up back into the first round and you draft one of the tackles or one of the receivers that are sitting there somewhere in the 20s. Do you trade number 34 for a veteran wide receiver 1? If that is available to you. If T. Higgins is available, do you deal 34 for T. Higgins? If Brandon Ayuk is available, do you deal 34 for Brandon Ayuk? Or here's another option, and I don't think a lot of people would love this. Trade back. You could argue the 34th pick is going to be very valuable. So maybe you move down a few slots, you pick up extra draft capital in the top 100, and because you did not move back into the first round, there's not much difference between the player that you're going to get at 34 and that you're going to get, let's say, if it's somewhere in the late 30s, early 40s. Those are some of the options. Want your thoughts on that. Before we continue, want to remind you, Alex Barth on the program tomorrow. Barth will join us. We'll go through a lot of the prospects. We'll have some fun. Alex Barth right here tomorrow at 11 a.m. draft week. Do not miss it. Here's what I would do. And if you want your quote or your comment, your question to be thrown out onto the screen, don't forget you can send a super chat. Super chats get you to the front of the line. They also support the program financially, which means the world to me. My number one option, trade into the 20s for an offensive tackle. Trade up, get into the 20s, and get a legitimate left tackle prospect. That's my number one option. Left tackle to me is more important than a wide receiver. If you're drafting, again, the premise is that you stuck at number 3 and you picked either May or Daniels. To me, the most important thing that you can do for this young franchise quarterback is protect his ass. And the way you do that is by drafting a legitimate left tackle prospect, a guy that you think can be the cornerstone on that left side of the line for the next 10 to 15 years. If you think you got that guy sitting there in the 20s, then you move on up the board and you draft that tackle. That's my number one option. Yes, receiver helps young quarterbacks. We all know that. But to me, left tackle is more valuable than a wide receiver 1. Offensive line, trenches. It's a little old school, but I believe that. Protect the young quarterback. You could have a great receiver, but if the quarterback is running for his life because Chuks Okorafor isn't working out on the left side, then who cares about that wide receiver? If the quarterback is running for his life, if he's taking massive hits, that's a problem. You build from the inside out. So if you could get a tackle somewhere in the 20s, be aggressive, move back into that first round, and draft that tackle. That would be my number one option. I'm not confident that there's going to be a legit starting left tackle at 34 sitting there for you. Now, maybe Kingsley Suamataia will be there. If so, then you stick and pick. I'd be fine with that. If you told me this was Drake May or Jayden Daniels and Kingsley, your first two picks, I'd be fine with that. But if there is this run, again, Burt Breer said, 7, 8 tackles in the first round, maybe more. If there is this run, because a lot of teams in the league are looking at tackle. Offensive line play has declined precipitously over the past several years. A lot of teams that are contenders need offensive line help. There are going to be a lot of teams looking for tackles. You don't want to miss that boat. So if you could move back into the first round and get one of those first round talents at left tackle, then you do it. Let's not forget the Patriots had Tyler Guyton in for a top 30 visit. That's somebody who could go in the 20s. You move up a few spots to draft that guy. If you think Guyton's a left tackle, then you make that move. Offensive line play is declining across the NFL. Meanwhile, wide receiver play is booming. And wide receivers are more readily available than tackles are. You can find a wide receiver one a hell of a lot easier than you can find a left tackle one. And I know some people say, well, the Patriots haven't been able to do that, Nick, over the last several years. I think that's a regime problem versus a lack of depth or talent problem. We have seen so many teams over the past few years add wide receiver ones. To me, it's an easier path to add a wide receiver down the road than it is a left tackle. Wide receivers become available. Tyreek Hill gets traded, right? T. Higgins is likely to stay, but there's the opportunity, the possibility that he gets dealt. Brandon Ayuk could get traded. So when you look at receivers, they're more available. How many times do you hear that a left tackle is available? That a legitimate stud left tackle is available via trade? And how many legitimate left tackles get drafted outside of the first round? There are just so many more opportunities to land that future wide receiver than the left tackle. So I make a move up into that first round and I draft a left tackle. And I start my draft with my quarterback, my franchise quarterback, my future guy at the most pivotal position in the league. I have him at 3. Then I move back into the late first round to draft my tackle. It's the same thing I did during my mock draft several weeks ago. I have not changed. My mock draft was Drake May at 3, moving back into the first round for Amarius Mims. And I still feel like that is the best. That is the best approach to this draft. If you stick and pick at 3 with your quarterback, move back into the late first round and get yourself that tackle. Perfect scenario to me. Quarterback at 3, left tackle in the 20s. Then you come back and you draft a wide receiver in the 3rd round. And then I would also try as hard as I could to trade for a veteran wide receiver 1 after the draft with future compensation. Like my scenario, right? If you said, Nick, what is your perfect world? My perfect world is Drake May at 3, left tackle in the 20s, wide receiver in the 3rd round. Let's say Jalen McMillan, doesn't have to be him. And then you trade for that true X. You trade for that true X, but that true X is a veteran. That would be the perfect scenario. That's what I would say. Alex Barth on tomorrow's podcast. Draft day, we're going to be loaded, okay? Here's what we're doing on draft day. Regular 11 a.m. podcast. We'll do that. Then we're going to come back. We're going to do a preview of round one here on the YouTube channel. We're going to jump from that preview later on in the day. We're going to jump from that preview to the Patreon page to have a community chat where I take a bunch of questions. We talk about the latest rumors. We do that chat for about 30 minutes at Patreon. Then we all watch the draft. And as soon as a decision is made at 3, I will be back on here to review what happened, cover the breaking news with all of you. It's going to be a very busy draft day. It's going to be a very fun draft day. So that's what we're doing. Don't forget to give us that thumbs up, like and subscribe, rate and review. The Patreon is full of draft content this week. $5 a month, $1.25 a week. Tonight, we're going to look at Drake May and some very interesting metrics during that exclusive Patreon podcast. All right. Before I bid you adieu, I got to squeeze in some Celtics and Bruins because obviously it was playoff weekend. Both teams had their game ones. I went more in depth on the B's and C's on the Patreon page last night, exclusive podcast for all those members. Celtics, Miami zone, not nearly effective with Kristaps Porzingis on the floor. Get him to the free throw line. He can find his teammates rather easily. He can knock down the 15 to 18-foot jump shot. Nobody is tall enough to contest that shot for Kristaps. He is the secret sauce. Brad Stevens made the move for Porzingis with the Miami Heat in mind. He saw what that zone did to them last year. He didn't like it. He wanted a good option to help them get out of it. And your good option, if not great option, was Porzingis. I loved how Jason Tatum managed the game yesterday. Getting double teamed, finding the open teammate. He did not rush anything. He took his time. They played through him, and he managed the game very well. Also liked his response after the Caleb Martin play. Get up, go shoot the free throws. You got more basketball left in this postseason. Don't get involved in that crap. Let your play speak for itself. I also like Jaylen Brown stepping up. Loved it. Loved Brown stepping up and sticking up for Jason Tatum. That's what you want to see. Love that reaction from Brown. Defensively, Drew Holiday is going to cause Tyler Hero a lot of problems. He bothered Hero all day long yesterday. He got up into his space. He challenged and contested shots. He dug at the basketball when Hero tried to get his pull-up game working. Holiday versus Hero, major part of this series. Porzingis also defensively, don't overlook his rim protection. He changes shots. He blocks shots. Did a good job of that yesterday. Meanwhile, the Bruins. Could Swayman lead to a deep run? He absolutely could. Let's see how he plays tonight. I thought starting him game one was the right thing to do. We talked about that on the podcast. He has been unbelievable against Toronto, and he was unbelievable on Saturday night. Play him tonight. That's what I would do. And if he's very good tonight, I continue to play him. No reason to sit him against Toronto with the way he's played in this matchup. Second thing, power play. A little bit of a revival since the couple of tweaks from Coach Montgomery. If that power play continues to play well, Toronto's in trouble. And Toronto's PK against the power play of Boston was not good all year long. It continued to struggle on Saturday night. Will Toronto get momentum from that third period? Bruins get a little lackadaisical. Toronto kind of found its game a little bit. Will that third period leak into tonight? Hopefully not. Bruins have to come out, shot out of a cannon, and be ready for early intensity and urgency from the Maple Leafs. They have to stop any kind of momentum that the Maple Leafs think that they got from the third period on Saturday. And finally, the series could be very tight. If you look at the odds, if you look at Vegas, it's telling us it could be very tight. Defend home ice. You got to get this win tonight. All right, Alex Barth tomorrow. Give us that thumbs up. Don't forget to like and subscribe. 3,500 subscribers is the next goal. Let's try to hit that with all of your help. Like, subscribe, rate, and review on Spotify and Apple Pods. And if you're over at Spotify and Apple Pods, you can matriculate over to YouTube to give us that thumbs up. And, of course, you can also subscribe even if you listen on Spotify and Apple Pods. You can help us out over here at YouTube if you have the time. It'll only take a couple of seconds. Patreon this week, full of draft content. Should be a great week, baby. We got 3 more sleeps until the draft. I'm fired up. You're fired up. Finally, we're going to have some decisions made this week. And I'm not being hyperbolic when I say this. This week could be the most significant week of the Patriots' next 5 to 8 years. If they do it right, they set themselves up. If they swing and miss, man, oh man, the rebuild gets that much more challenging. But we're going to have tons of content. Can't wait to deliver it to all of you. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate your support. I appreciate you watching and listening. I appreciate the super chats. Until tomorrow, unless something big breaks, 11 a.m. tomorrow, Alex Barth will be with us to talk about this draft and all the prospects. Thank you. I appreciate you. This has been the Nick Cattle Show.